Hello, everybody. Welcome to this session of the Mindful Drinking Festival. Today, we've got a really awesome Q&A with somebody who I admire greatly, actually. I've seen speak several times. People may know that I've got a background in politics in the third sector. So Sharath has been around that space for a long time. I've read many of his articles. And I was really interested to bring Sharath to you today because he's got a new book out and it felt like it was just perfectly timed for now. His book's called Intrinsic and it's all about motivation. And Sharath, let me ask you why you decided to write a book about motivation that isn't just about how you keep motivation in organizations, but how people who are keep their own personal motivation in terms of particularly the roles that they have, their jobs, their careers, the things that they pursue in their lives.
Yeah, thanks, Laura. It was such an honor to be on, and such a big fan of what the festival is trying to achieve as well. And yeah, look, I think we're in a motivational mess. I think we were in one before the pandemic. I think that has become and has accelerated into a full-blown crisis now, and that occurs, I think, across all of the main areas of our lives, as you alluded to. So, in work, for example, in our careers, and how we think about success more broadly, in our relationships with our significant other, in how we parent our children. And finally, how we engage as citizens, look at the mess and the big social problems around us. But what is really, really powerful, that's the whole message of Intrinsic as a book, is that there is a way out. We can find a better way if we can use motivation thinking and all these decades of research to help us live more fulfilled, happier, and more successful lives. And as you say, both as individuals, in the organizations, communities we're part of, and as society at large. So yeah, there's a huge amount of optimism if we can shift our mental models.
And the reason why I thought it was really important to get you on today is that one of the things that we talk to people about in Club Soda, and this was the same for me, is that when you're changing your drinking, you're talking about what it is that you're taking away because you're worried about a substance that you've been using too much. And one way to keep motivated is to focus on what it is that you want for your life, where it is you want to go. And for those of you who don't know, for me, I've got a politics background and I ended up in a job I didn't enjoy. And I've been very much, my identity has been very much tied up with my public service roles. And to be in something that I didn't enjoy meant, and where I wasn't needed really, it was a sinecure of a role, if anybody ever wants to look up that word. And I lost all sense of purpose. And my drinking went up and up and up. And actually what giving up drinking did was allow me to refined my purpose and also reconnect with my values. It's a very short version of how strongly I feel about this. But for me now, I'm living the life that I want to lead, and to drink again would take that away from me. And so how can people begin to think about all of the things that are worrying them right now, all the things they think are holding them back, all the ways they think they're not living the life they lead, and begin to unpick that? What tools have you got that they can use to begin to focus on that bigger picture? And not just focus on not drinking, but where not drinking can take them. It's just a big one there, Sharath. I hope you can.
No. It's a really good.
Oh my God, that's such a big question.
No, I love the word sinecure. I'm going to keep that in my new vocabulary as well. So no, great word. But no, look, I think there's so much we can do, and I think I would say start with work first. I think you alluded to the fact that some of the issues you were facing, and thanks for being so open and transparent. I think many of us, to be honest, have felt this through the pandemic. Probably many of us have ended up drinking too much. I could definitely say at the beginning of the pandemic, it was very tempting to, you were at home. There was, it's very easy to generously pour yourself something, in the evenings and so on as well. So I think, look, I think a lot of it is about how we find purpose in our work to begin with. And I define purpose as how what we do helps and serves others. And it's really important we see the core purpose in our work, because I believe we're social animals, and that all jobs intrinsically are purposeful. And I talk in the book about an example where I was in writing the book, in a bar, actually, an ironic twist to this, but watching a bartender speak for about 45 minutes with a couple at the bar. It looked like a middle-aged man and his teenage daughter. He was getting to try and taste different things. And I went to him afterwards and said, "What were you doing? You were spending so much time with this couple." And he said, "Sharath, look, I could see in front of me there was a divorced man with his teenage daughter. He was on his visitation rights. He didn't have a lot of time with his daughter. They weren't very close. My job was not to just pour drinks then. It was to forge a human connection." And so that idea that, all of our work inherently is purposeful, how can we try and bring that back to the core of our lives? And a lot of it's because we've sliced and diced our work in a way that often detracts from purpose. So I talk to teachers, for example, who feel like they're no longer igniting young minds, and no longer serving communities. They're there to achieve a good Ofsted rating or look good on a league table. Doctors who no longer feel like they're serving patients. They're trying to achieve some kind of waiting list target, right, in the NHS. So it's really important in whatever work we do that we reconnect to that core. Who are we trying to help? And how are we trying to help them? And I have a simple tip, which is the idea of a personal mission statement. I think all of us should have one. Let me give you mine as an example. I help organizations and individuals to reignite inner drive by writing, coaching, and consulting. And so just that North Star, that sense of what am I here to try and do in terms of my work, that can be deeply motivating and keeps us really absorbed in our work and understanding how we're making a contribution more widely.
But Sharath, so much of work is outside of our control. You can have a personal mission that says, I want to do these things, but you've got a boss constantly breathing down your neck or zooming you. How do you manage to reclaim control of that?
Yeah, so I do believe, Laura, in almost every circumstance, we can try and fall back in love with our work if there have been challenges. And using these levers, I talk in the book about this idea of purpose, but also the sense of autonomy, which you sort of alluded to, the sense of us being at the wheel of our working lives. And the pandemic, for those of us who are sort of white collar workers, there has been more flexibility, more freedom come in because of that. I think many of the old assumptions, I think we're also able to be more authentic at work because, I'm in a room at Cambridge today for a talk I'm giving, and we're able to see each other in different sides of life as well. And finding that sense of mastery of us getting better and better at what we do in our working life, that's also a deep motivator. So if you've got a boss where something is getting in the way of your motivation, my biggest tip would be to have a conversation with them first and try and write down what is this lack of motivation or really costing you and the organization. All of us, I think, and the research is very clear, come into our work with a high degree of intrinsic motivation. Almost all of us do that. It tends to be the cultures around us tend to suck it out of us through over time. So just remind them. So look, I'm really here. This is my mission statement. I really want to achieve the organizations, but this aspect is dragging me down. Let me give an example from education. I talked to a teacher who was spending 7 or 8 hours a week entering data into spreadsheets. Now, it was pupil data, assessment data. I'm not saying it was not useful, but was this the right use of her time? Absolutely not. There should have been an app there, or maybe a volunteer could have done that in the school. But I think her head teacher would have been horrified if she'd had the courage to talk to him and say, this is how I'm spending my time. Keep a time diary, log how you're spending your time. Talk to your manager or your boss and say, look, is this really what I'm here for? Is this what the idea of my role is to be? And I'm sure most of the time you can find a way out. It may take a little while, but even if it takes that, he or she is aware of the problem and thinking about it. If they give you a blank look, sorry, it's just the way it is, that's useful information. Maybe you should be thinking about your next move over time. And there's this great resignation going on across organizations at the moment as well.
I mean, it's really interesting because when people are not sure about changing their drinking, one of the things we ask them to do is this decision balance sheet, which is, what are the benefits of things staying the same? What are the downsides of things staying the same? What are the benefits of change? What are the downsides of change? Of course, change isn't always easy. And I guess that's the same in your job. Is it so terrible to begin to delve into the things that you're not enjoying about your job and then take the time to work out how you might be able to have the conversations with the people to help change the way that job works? And any change takes a bit of work. You can't just say it and it magically happens. So, are there other questions that people can ask themselves about their job that might help them get to that conclusion, or whether it is something that they want to persevere at and change, or that they need to move on?
Yeah, great question, Laura. So I'll use 3 tests. I'll sound like a politician now, but the first test is the purpose test, right? And that's, is this job allowing me to achieve my personal mission statement? So I mentioned mine is to help organizations and individuals to reignite inner drive. Is my current role helping me in that to achieve that? That's the first test of whether we're on the right lines. The second test is around autonomy. am I able to live my life, my working life, with a degree of control and sense of direction and being at the wheel of my working life? And it's not perfect. It's always got to be guided. Obviously, we've got to make sure we align with our organizational priorities and those that who manage us and so on. But that's an important second part. And the third part would be a mastery test, which says, is this job helping me become a better and better version of myself each day? Am I developing new skills and new areas? And particularly in the human aspects of my work, less the technical, because we tend to get that a lot more easily. But am I able to interact with different people? I'm able to communicate well. I'm able to think critically and be creative. Those kinds of broader skills. Is this job allowing me to bring those three things? There's a whole concept that's come up now around job crafting, and the sense that, before what would happen is we'd apply for a job, there'd be a job description, JD and HR and a lingo, and we would mechanically apply, and then that would be like the Bible of our job in a working life for years to come. There's a real movement to say doesn't have to be that way. That yes, of course, there's got to be certain things on that JD that we have to do. So if you're an accountant, you've got to make sure the accounts show up on time. But there's a lot that we can bring our own selves to personalize or to craft that job. So if you're an accountant and you really enjoy dealing with people, you could have a lot of your time spent actually communicating the implications of your analysis with people across the business, for example. Or you could be, if you enjoy education, you could be training other managers who are not as financially literate to be more confident with their numbers, for example. So I think if we take those three tests, that one of purpose, the one of autonomy, the one of mastery, look at those as with a critical lens, then talk to our managers and think ourselves, but how can we craft our jobs to almost squeeze out every drop of purpose, autonomy, and mastery in it?
I think that's really important, because when I think, those people, there's lots of people in our community who, they get back from the end of a day of a job they're not enjoying or they feel isn't satisfying them in some way. And then, of course, we drink because it's easier to drink than to deal with trying to work out how to solve the problem. We drink because we feel awful about the way the job makes us feel. And then because we're drinking, it stops us taking control of those things that you just talked about, which is, really sitting down, really reflecting on whether this is all working, what I could do to make it work, asking yourself those three questions. Drinking stops you doing that, and so you end up in this real awful cycle. Hate the job because you hate the job, you drink it, and so on. And that's sort of where I was, and I often thought that I couldn't leave the job until I dealt with my drinking. But of course, I couldn't deal with my drinking until I left the job, and getting a secondment was the way out of that for me. So certainly, if you don't think your work life, or it could be your home life, we can come on to that in a minute, your work life or something very fundamental isn't one of the levers that's affecting your drinking, now's the time to sit and reflect and say, maybe it is, maybe that is part of the problem. Can I take control back here? I think that's really exciting.
Maybe try and bring these things together. Maybe this is a somewhat random thought, but one thing I noticed myself in the pandemic, I was drinking at the beginning a lot alone. At the end of a day, I'd be watching the what's the thing, like the COVID update with Matt Hancock and so on, or Boris Johnson or whatever. And there was so much anxiety in there. It was just an easy excuse to do that. And I had the weekly shop, the weekly trip we were allowed in the supermarket would stock up on lots of booze and so on as well. I think one tip might be, why not think about, at least as a first small step, at least just drinking with others, for example, and actually tying that into our work. So, a lot of work nowadays is about networking, about building new connections. Use that in the social sense of, it's a chance to, almost a social lubricant, to feel we, open up a bit more and talk to people in that way. We don't need drink for that, but it might be just one thing that makes it a little bit easier. So in a way, why not think about it in terms of just helping us achieve that purpose at work? And that will help channel and reduce it down quite a bit if we think about it in that way, maybe.
Certainly, if you're looking to moderate your drinking, having rules like that, never drinking alone, only doing it at certain circumstances with certain people, in certain places, and certain drinks. I have some issue with the fact that work culture in Britain tends to be so boozy. That's a whole other story. But certainly, I get great joy out of sober networking, actually, because I've realised through my work at Club Soda that so many people are socially anxious.
Yeah.
Not actually an issue for me. So one thing as somebody who isn't socially anxious is I can go into a room and I will just barge into a group of people and talk to them. I will scoop up the person stood at their own in the place and begin to talk to them, because that way everybody has a better time. It doesn't feel that they need to drink to deal with things. So I changed my lens on social things totally.
Yeah, and that builds just on this point about we're learning a lot about networks and their role in motivation at work, and the broader they are. So I love that idea of scooping up someone who's perhaps quieter at the side of the room and needs that, because that tends to be really, really powerful for our motivation. We feel better because we're supporting someone else who's part of the network. They feel better, and we build a really positive cycle over time.
Yeah. And another thing that I'm asking for a friend here, Sharath, what imposter syndrome? That's a real big issue in work for some people. So it's not that your work doesn't have meaning, but that you're continually frightened that why are you the person doing it? Why are you the authority? Are you any good at this? How can we deal with some of that in terms of our motivation? Because again, people drink to deal with those feelings of self-hate or inadequacy. And
no, it's a great question, Laura. So it's one of the key themes in my book Intrinsic was this idea that we're in this comparison culture that happens in our school system. Since we're literally toddlers up, we start to now create pressure and NCT groups and so on, where you're saying, well, Johnny's walking 6 months earlier than Priya, for example, or whatever it might be. So it's I think really important we take that competitive lens out. I went back to read Charles Darwin for the research for my book, and I found when he talked about survival of the fittest, he didn't mean a dog eat dog world. You've got to be a bit stronger, a bit fitter. He meant be diverse. He meant exhibit different strengths. Try and find something that's really unique to you. You've got unique strengths. So the idea of mastery is so powerful here, because it's not about competition at all. It's about becoming the best version of yourself that you can be. And every day seeing yourself get that little bit better. Roger Federer, the tennis player, I talked about in the book, that he plays the perfect tennis set in his mind. He hasn't played it yet, he believes, in real life. It's not against Djokovic and Nadal, it's against himself. And so I think if we can try and reduce that and really think about how can I be the best version of myself we can be, that can reduce that sense of an imposter syndrome and also that social anxiety you talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. And every time I go into a room, I have to remind myself that nobody else really knows what they're doing, right? We're all just trying to work out how to do the best that we all can. And there's nobody who is an expert in the room any more than anybody else. They're just they know different things in different ways and have different ways of learning. And I continually do that when I go into a room. So as I feel like I belong. So there we are. So social anxiety isn't my issue, but imposter syndrome is. So there we are. Sharath, we've talked quite a lot about work, and I know that often preoccupies people, partly because it's socially acceptable to talk about how work isn't necessarily doing it for you, but also because it occupies such a large part of our day. Before I move off of that, how do people know that they're really in the wrong job and they just need to, now's the time to walk away and find out what that purpose is? Do you need to know what your purpose is before you leave? That sort of thing.
I think it helps, Laura, because, and I hope that the book will really help people. There's some really practical things in there that we can about how we can find that purpose. The reason is it's often hard to know whether a job is right or not if we don't know where we're trying to go. And I talk about this kind of image of the book about motivation being like that long Indian car journey. What is the destination, that GPS? Where are we trying to go with our work identity and work life first? Once we know that, have a sense, we have something to sort of assess whether our current job is a good fit for that, what that cost of inaction, as I talk about in the book, is for us if we stay in the job. I think a lot of jobs, I have to say, they can be crafted to be more motivating. A lot of times we can reframe and reposition what we do and discuss it with our employers to bring out that intrinsic motivation at work. So I don't think a lot of times we can actually salvage a lot and actually get to a very good place. Just think, though, that it needs to we need to first give it a shot, but we'll also be willing to move on if we find we can't at the end of it. But the first instinct should be, what can we do with our current role? But there's always that opportunity to look out as well and think of something else.
It's often really popular to talk about wholesale change, right? You're going to move from this career to this type of career. But giving up drinking made me realise I was already in the right space. I'm just better at that when I'm not drinking and hungover all the time. And so actually it's quite empowering to realise that that you were doing the right sorts of things all along. Now you just need to find out where to put that energy.
Yeah, we really agree. I think that's true. I think you talked about the personal side of life, Laura, as well on this. And, I think a lot of this is also about, I do think work is important because it tends to have a spillover effect. Let me just give an example. I spend a lot of time on cricket pitches waiting for my son to finish a match, and lots of dads are shouting at their kids, just saying, bowl this way, or why didn't you hit the six at that time, and so on. They're living their lives through their children because they themselves have not achieved motivation, often at work. But so it's important to get it right. But I think there's so much in the personal domain as well. And of course, we're very complete human beings. Part of the thing I was looking at in the book is the role of relationships today with our significant other, whether we're straight, gay, whatever. That has become more and more important to us because our communities are fragmented more and more. We don't contribute. We don't go to the scouts group so much, or play in the cricket league or the tennis club quite as much as we used to. And so we're relying on our significant other more and more to achieve happiness in our lives and motivation. And I think in a way that probably is quite dangerous now, where we want them to be the life coach, we want them to be the guru, the soulmate, the confidant, and be great out of the sheets, all these kinds of things. And it's really unrealistic to expect one person to do all these things for us, right? They may exist, but that's a hard ask to go for, to be very honest. And I think what you said, Laura, about networks, and we're learning more and more, is the value of broad, but this idea of weak ties. We don't need to be everyone's best friends, but having a broad social network is really important for us to know. So it could be the person you play tennis with. I'm a keen tennis fan, as you can tell. Having that 10-minute chat after, saying what's going on in your life, what do you do, how old are your kids, etc. It's amazing how feeling connected to a wider group of people can really help us to stay motivated in what we do. And so, and that can mean we can focus our key romantic relationship on this aspect of emotional safety, that person is there for us as we manage the zigzag of life, that respect and love is unconditional. They allow us to try new identities, to experiment with different things, different jobs, different directions, and so on as well.
You're talking my language here, Sharath, because I'm very not in favor of escalator style relationships. And so, but what's really interesting is several things happen for people, I think. One is lots of people, if you're drinking a lot, it's quite possible that you're drinking a lot with your partner as well. So not only are you very emotionally tied up with one person that you spend a lot of time with, because it's really easy to not do anything else and to sit at home in front of the TV drinking wine together, but that habit's also tied up with that relationship. So people find it very hard to stop drinking if their partner then continues to drink. So that's one thing. The other is then you talk about this broad network of friendships, and I think this is really important. I have many friends on what I would call on a scale of intimacy. Then you see, who's also my co-founder, is my most intimate partner. But he certainly, I need all my other friends, because there are things that you see doesn't enjoy that I enjoy, that I need other people for, and I need other people to give me energy to be motivated. So there's this little circle that goes around. But finding new friends, people find the most difficult. And so I guess where does creating this manifesto in your head for what you want your personal and social life to look like, somehow it seems a lot harder than the workplace the minute you talk about it, Sharath, because the workplace, there's a chain of command. You can come with a list of suggestions. In a workplace, it's expected, at least a manager should sit and listen to expectations. But it's a whole different ball game with partners who you're close to, and then finding friends that don't even exist yet. Where do we even go to creating our motivation to make that happen?
Yeah, I think a lot of it's about feeling authentic, Laura, so you can actually be yourself. And then you attract this kind of idea of finding a tribe is a really interesting one. And I do think actually, in a strange way, a lot can happen through helping and serving others. So what I'd say the best advice, I looked at online dating in the book, for example, Intrinsic, and what I found was that people it was quite easy to get on kind of almost a dating addiction culture, where you just hop from date to date, and the process of dating is what becomes the outcome, rather than actually finding the person that you want, because there's that paradox of choice, right? There's always that sense that you have a great date, but someone out there could be even better, and it's impossible to sort of select someone and keep going. So I think the core idea is that we need to develop a way for us to find the people we want to be with, and um, really try and look broadly across our lives and say, who are those people? Cultivate these broader friendships and be active in the world. I think at the core, volunteer if you can, mentor someone. So it doesn't even need to be formal volunteering, but there's a lot of research now that says if you're generous to someone else, I talk in the book about being a nurturer to someone else. If you nurture someone, there's almost a karmic truth that someone will nurture you in return. It may not even be the same person. It probably won't be, but just that fact you're more generous, you're more active, you feel more purposeful. You feel you're helping and serving others more. You light up, you radiate, and you generate this kind of positive energy, momentum, motivationally. That means other people will want to be with you and enjoy being with you as well. So I think the biggest tip would be that the easiest way to get something is not always to directly try and go after that thing. So it may not be go on hundreds of online dates. It might be just be more active in your local community, engage in lots of activities, go out, meet lots of people just naturally through what you do, and almost by sort of accident, the right person will come along, for example.
Yeah, because if you're doing dating only, then every single interaction you have is focused on, is this person going to be a future intimate relationship or not? It's a very binary way to look at things. And I think if I was to talk about my sort of personal social manifesto, I have a number of interests that I want to pursue at this point in time. They're not always the same. There are different ways that I can connect with people to do those. So, for example, I'm on a silent movie meetup group because I quite enjoy silent movies. I see those people occasionally, but they're nice people to spend time with. I have people that I swim with and I connect with them through Facebook. I've joined the running club. I think maybe deciding when you're changing your drinking of the things that you would like to try or things that you used to do that you haven't done for a while, and look at places to do them. And some of them you will go and pursue with great gusto, and some you will try and realize it's not really for you anymore because time has moved on. But that combination of finding people with similar interests to you is what would keep you motivated in going somewhere, because you can geek out about, I've got a whole group of friends who are just into tea, and we go on tea crawls, just geeking out about tea without having to worry that you're boring everyone else is blissful.
I should join you on a tea crawl, Laura, as well in the future. So I'd love to. But yeah, and I think what's great with that idea of that broad network is that you also, and I don't mean network in that sort of sense of again going out just to find a job, but knowing your wide range of people, you're likely to expand your social circle, as you said. You'll be active. You won't be in the house. You're going to reduce your drinking as a result, most likely. But also, you're also in terms of the work world, you're going to get all this rich set of information, ideas, and what other people are doing that you may say, well, look, I really like what that person's doing, or they've got this really useful skill. They could perhaps give me some advice and help and guidance. And you don't need to go looking for it, but it will happen just by that sort of organic process of doing it. And that's often the best way is deep, this idea of deep engagement. It's deeply engaged in life. And then motivation will come naturally from that.
And I think that's really interesting that we often put motivation in a pocket on its own. I need to be motivated. We often think about it towards either changing drinking or getting fitter. But actually, motivation comes from understanding what you want from all bits of your life, I guess. Because we need, even if we're an introvert, we need other people to give us energy and inspire us, even if it's only that much, whereas I need it that much. That's really helpful, and you learn vicariously through meeting those people.
Yeah, exactly. And I think there's this element of sort of being vulnerable and open. And let me just give you an example, actually, Laura, when it comes to parenting. So I think we've created this real mess as parents. I mean, we talked about motivational crises, but God, our young people, I'm a parent of a 10-year-old and 7-year-old, and it's tough, first of all. And there's a lot of pressure on kids now. We have huge rates of anxiety in the UK. We have the highest level of adolescent anxiety in all of the European world, for example. And a lot of this stems, I think, from the fact that as parents, we're not able to be honest with our kids about the kind of world they're going to go into. And that is that world of unknown unknowns, to quote a former US foreign secretary, or really that world we've seen in the pandemic, where it's a zigzag, not a straight line. And we tend to project ourselves in a way that makes us look perfect to our children. So a friend of mine, he lost his job in his 40s. It took him 2 weeks to tell his son that that had happened. What does that say? That basically gives that impression that life has got to be perfect, that you can't admit something has gone wrong in your life, and you are a failure, even rather than something has just failed that time, right? And they're very different things. And so I think that idea that, so I applied for a very prestigious US scholarship recently for a research thing, and I didn't get it. My kids were very excited when I did the application. They thought they could spend some time in the States. And I told them, look, I didn't get it. I looked a bit that evening. I looked a little bit crestfallen and a bit more subdued, to be honest. But a couple of days later, they saw me bounce back and get back to normal and think about what next to do. And so I think the idea of role modeling as parents and showing our kids that life is as that there are ups and downs, but the idea of intrinsic motivation is not to get too attached to the outcome of our work, but do it because we deeply care about that thing, whether it's in our work life or our private life, and trust that if you do that over time, good things will happen. And the research shows that it does.
Can I want to come back to this sort of parenting thing, mainly because I'm not a parent, so I'm always really fascinated to pull as much information from people who are. But, when we've talked about creating a personal manifesto around the ways that we want to be in the world, and therefore it gives us motivation to work towards those, parenting feels like it's a little bit different to that, because you are responsible for small beings, and therefore that your manifesto isn't yours. Surely it's all about the manifesto you have for your children, right?
Yes, so I have a particular view. I think what's happened is, Khalil Gibran had that really famous quote that, your children are not your children. I really agree with that. And, our children, they're their own people. They're going to find their way in the world. And I think if we see our role as helping them find their own motivation, not to impose our motivational mindset on them, that's the key distinction there. So we should be looking out for what things do they really enjoy? When are they deeply engaged? My younger one can spend hours with a Lego set, for example, or building something. If I literally have to shake him on the back to get him, almost take him out of that spell, it's a great sign that something that deeply motivates him. Let's see if there are ways to go and engage with that. My older one, we used to play tennis together. He was actually a very good player. We went to India one summer. He became a cricket nut, and now tennis is a distant memory. And I felt sad for a while because I love the game so much, but I realized that that's not that's his life, and he's got to find what he enjoys doing. What we know, though, and that's really one of the really exciting things of all this new research, that it doesn't matter what kids do. It's what matters is how they engage in life. And going back to full circle to what we talked about as adults, they can be tiddlywinks champions, they can be swimmers, they can be whatever. But the key thing is to avoid sleepwalking through life, which so many young people today do, because we bombard them with so many things and structures and extracurricular activities and extra tuition and all this kind of stuff they have to go through. They become like robots. They're programmed. They're going through what we want them to do. They're not driving lives themselves. That sense of autonomy talked about, they don't feel in the wheel of their lives. So the more we can give them the freedom to pick what they really enjoy and let them carve their own paths, it doesn't that tiddlywink skill will translate in the job market later on, because they'll learn so much about being curious, about working with people, about how to solve unusual problems. And we know that's the skills that really matter in the workforce now as well.
And I think I'm really pleased that answer, obviously, but because this is what I thought you would say. But, it is that important thing around, you're allowed to have your own manifesto for you as a person. You're not giving yourself over to your children and your loved ones all the time. But then you can also have a manifesto that is about how you engage with those people that are important in your life, and what your role is in helping those people be an individual, not part of your unit, but what your role is in doing that. And that can be incredibly fulfilling, and that comes back to that idea that that's an intrinsic motivation. You're helping and supporting someone else to be the best person that they can be as well.
Yeah, I think it's so important. If you're a parent, Laura, my wife and I try and have a night where we call it a no parents night, where we'll meet up with other friends, but we don't talk about our kids. And the other couple may or may not have kids themselves, whichever way, but we just talk about ourselves. It's a chance for us to be real people as well. And I think we've so confused our identity so much with our children. They're almost inseparable sometimes. And I think we need to be attached. We also need to have a level of detachment that, we have to do the best we can for our kids, but it's their lives ultimately to lead. And the joy of life is we don't know what's going to be in store for them. Let them embrace that, and that's one of the really nice joys of life, is that so many things can happen.
I was just thinking how much I from the outside of not having children and having many friends with children, how I recognise that how solid the family unit is these days. I want people to lend me their children to go and see children's theatre, right? I love going to the theatre. I love sharing theatre with young people, and I love going to children's theatre. It always looks better when you've got a child with you, right? You look, that's weird. But no, they're all so busy in these units. And, maybe part of parenting is about working out how you can bring other people into their lives too. It's fascinating from my perspective, from where I sit in the parenting journey.
Yeah, there's an African proverb, right? It takes a village to raise a child, and I think we do that. So my kids spend at least usually about a night a week with my parents. They don't live too far away, and they can do that. They're really close to their grandparents. We don't ask them what they've. I mean, they're in their hands, as it were, as well. It's so important both for us to have that freshness, but also for our kids to have other influences and role models. If your kids have a godparent, let them spend time with a godparent and talk to them, have a different view of what success looks like in life, different role models. So important they have different influences as well. We can't be the only people that they see in terms of adults.
Absolutely. So let me just draw this back, because I'm now going to be inundated with people wanting me to take their kids to theatre, I think. So that's going to happen. But let's draw that back, because what we've talked about is that basically we've talked about the fact that the life that you want is possible. You have given us the confidence and the inspiration that what we want is possible. And we need to look at our different bits of life and to begin to craft that personal manifesto. Does that mean we might have one manifesto for work and one manifesto for home and one manifesto for friendships? Or does it just need to be one thing, Sharath? And how might we go about building that?
So the chapters of the book, Laura, look at those key aspects of our lives. They look at our work, our success and careers, our relations, our parenting, our citizenship, the 5 sort of wheels that make our life whole, if you like. And I think what the book tries to do is look at each one of them and say, how do we find these elements of purpose, autonomy, and mastery? But it also looks at how do these things all interlock together. And that's really important. And I think the key thing is to make a step in a positive direction in one of these areas. I often suggest starting with work because it's a bit more tangible. It's a bit easier. We're going to be spending 90,000 hours working over our lives. It's a lot of our time is spent at work, for better or worse. So that's one way, but it could also be through a relationship change, or a reframing, I should say, rather, an existing relationship. So you rediscover who your loved one really is, for example, and find that motivation again. It could be about how we parent, and really seeing our children for who they are and helping them become the best versions of themselves that we could be. Or it could be something you talked about, which is engaging the local community, being a more active citizen or community member. That can be very powerfully motivating. So normally in people's lives, there's one first step that is most logical. Many times it's from work, but it doesn't have to be at all. And taking that first small step creates a positive cycle where that confidence, that motivation spills over into the other aspects. You see yourself differently, and then you feel open to trying more and more new things. The key thing is to start and putting that cost of an action down, writing that down, being honest with yourself for why the status quo is not working. That can help to create that motivational momentum to make that leap forward.
And then I wanted to touch on one last thing, which is I always know that if there's a big event in the world, that a lot of people will come into the Club Soda community the day after and say they drank too much or they've started drinking again. And that's because big world events seem really outside our control, and they seem overwhelming, and you don't understand what you can do as an individual. And so a natural response, particularly for people who alcohol is a big part of their lives, is to drink. I mean, or I can even see myself now over the years watching the news of big world events in complete despair, despite being involved in politics myself, and thinking, I don't know what to do about these things. How can we begin to not feel that overwhelm about things that we can't change, but work out what our path as a citizen in the world is?
Yeah, Laura, in the book I talk about this difference between kind problems and wicked problems. And the kind problems have a stable technical solution. So getting to Mars, as Elon Musk got us to last year, that's obviously an incredible human feat, but it's a kind problem. There is a stable technical solution of getting to Mars. Wicked problems, Black Lives Matter, for example, erupted just days after Elon Musk's voyage into Mars. there's no way to solve racial injustice, to fully address it. So that's a classic wicked problem where it's fundamentally human. It's about how we interact, how we create societies, how we construct and work together. It's about motivation. So what we have to realize is more and more of the problems in our world are going to be wicked problems. There are no easy solutions. And rather than getting overwhelmed, what I found is that deeply motivated people are actually motivated to think about those wicked problems and make a first step to addressing them. Because what's so exciting is that you can make a real dent in them, but that problem will keep changing and evolving over time. It's got back to that idea of, Roger Federer's never played the perfect set because he keeps getting better and better as a player. We can keep contributing in different ways to that problem. And so rather than see it as a source of anxiety, let's actually see it as a source of motivation that we have a chance in our lifetime to make big dents in problems like climate change or inequality or issues around sovereignty and identity we're seeing around the world as well.
It is a cliche, but it's true. It's all about small steps, and you know, and some of small steps you have more control over, and you're able to do, and at least you know that you're contributing. I've been through a big process of because Newham doesn't recycle very much stuff, of working out where I can take other stuff that I think should be recycled to be recycled, and it's making me feel better just not to put so much rubbish back into landfill. And I know it's only a small step, but at least it's a step.
Yeah, and I think we have to have the confidence that if we do that with others, that it will make a big dent in these problems over time.
But it's also knowing that you feeling that way isn't unique. We actually all feel that overwhelm from big problems. So don't shy away from talking to other people about them, because then you share that experience of feeling despair and upset, and that actually does help too. And it's also a nice way to connect with other people.
Yeah, really agree, Laura.
Never keep it in. There's always somebody who'll want to talk about it. Sharath, can you just show us the cover of your book? I think you've got it on your Kindle there, just so that people know what...
sorry, I'm in a hotel room today, so that's this book. It's called Intrinsic. Hope we can see it in the right way up as well.
The book, it's on Kindle, it's in paper, and I've been listening to the audio version because that's my preferred way of doing things. So do listen to them all. I'm grateful that you've come today, Sharath, and I'm always excited to hear your wisdom around this stuff. And I hope people have taken away something today. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Laura. Such a pleasure.